Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? I know we're in a wonderful festive mood, but we don't want to keep you here all night, so I have to keep the program going. I'm Jeff Ballou, news editor with Al Jazeera Media Network and the 110th president of the National Press Club. Thank you for being here tonight. In this year, where I've been reminding everybody in these challenging times to press freedom, that we are the Constitution. A lot of those, a lot of people in here are our colleagues, and it's been a very interesting year for us. But I just want to remind you that you have something to stand on, and it's the founding documents of this country. The National Press Club is the world's leading professional organization for journalists. And tonight, one of our most important events to recognize two outstanding journalists with our highest honor, the Fourth Estate Award. This year's honorees are Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, award co-host of ESPN's Pardon the Interruption. They are the 45th recipients of the award and the first joint recipients. Through the prism of sports, these two journalists have served to unify people of all walks of life, bringing clarity, debate, humor, depth, and wisdom to the table across print, online, radio, and television platforms. In addition, over their long careers, they've mentored a host of journalists and engaged in countless philanthropic endeavors. At a time where we perhaps need it most, they provide us with a timeless camaraderie, cordiality, and candor that can be found in America's best pastime, the world of sports. I'm especially proud of this year's choices of honorees because it ties into a theme that I've embraced all year. Those of you who are members remember being in this ballroom a few months ago in January where I declared the theme that we are a club of champions. That's a take of my hometown of Pittsburgh, what we call the city of champions. So, we had 308 people with terrible towels and all these other wonderful things that we were waving. But tonight is not that night for me. It's not my night. It's Tony and Mike's night. But it's intentionally sports-minded because the club brings people from a variety of backgrounds and constituencies to join us in support of freedom of the press, the questioning of headliners from all over the world, excellence in journalism, and the finest journalism that we can create and support, and do so in a way that's fun and helps us all get to know each other better. Tonight's awardees are an extension of that theme: teamwork, innovation, the ability to bring generations of people around one common subject. This is an important legacy and ethos for the National Press Club. So thanks for sharing this year's vision with me as we celebrate tonight's Fourth Estate awardees and our other honorees of the evening. I'm going to introduce the dais here. We are joined at the head table, starting by my far right, Michelle Salcedo, the membership secretary of the National Press Club and who works for the Associated Press. Emilio Gutierrez, who is here to accept the 2017 Aubuchon Press Freedom Award on behalf of the Press Corps of Mexico. Don Graham, longtime owner and publisher of the Washington Post, current chairman of the board of Graham Holdings, and a fellow Rust Belt city, Detroit, Pittsburgh, yeah. Barbara Cochran of the University of Missouri, and president of the National Press Club Journalism Institute Board of Directors. One of our honorees tonight, Tony Kornheiser. And Mike Wilbon. John Skipper, ESPN president and co-chairman of Disney Media Networks. Margaret Talev, President of the White House Correspondents Association and Senior White House Correspondent for Bloomberg News and CNN political analyst. The legendary Bob Woodward, editor and Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the Washington Post and a previous recipient of the Press Club's Fourth Estate Award. And last but not least, Maury Povich, television personality and around here affectionately known as Shirley's kid, because Shirley Povich, his dad, was the 1995 recipient of the Fourth Estate Award. Thank you for joining us tonight, Maury. There are several board members of the National Press Club and the National Press Club Journalism Institute boards. Will you please rise so you can be recognized? Thank you. Team members I am deeply proud to serve with, thank you. Now to tell us more about the National Press Club Journalism Institute is its president, my counterpart, Barbara Cochran.
Thank you, Jeff, and hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. These are definitely challenging times for journalism, so let's say it loudly and as often as we can. Freedom of the press at home and abroad is the priority of the National Press Club and its Journalism Institute. This is a year when journalists have been explicitly targeted by people and forces who see freedom of information as a threat to their power. Lately, the fierce debate over the right of free expression has even spilled over into the world of sports. That's why the National Press Club and its nonprofit Journalism Institute are especially proud to salute this evening's Fourth Estate honorees and the winners of our John Aubuchon Freedom of the Press Awards. If anyone wonders about the importance of the news media, all they have to do is look at the life-saving service performed in the past month by coverage of devastating hurricanes and just this week of the terrible shootings in Las Vegas. News media provided critical information about safety during the storms and survival afterward. They transmitted the true conditions and pleas for help from storm victims. They told stories of individual heroism in Las Vegas and gave information about where to go for vitally needed resources, even where to donate blood. All this was done by reporters, videographers, editors, and producers working countless hours under dire conditions and sometimes risking their own lives to accurately report the truth on the ground. Their sole aim has been to serve the public, hardly the behavior of enemies of the people or purveyors of fake news. The news media do not consider themselves to be the enemies of any president. In the words of Washington Post editor Marty Barron, we're not at war, we're at work. After dinner, we'll share more about awards going to journalists who do that essential work every day. Our two Aubuchon Award winners tonight are the journalists of Mexico who are being killed with terrifying frequency as they report on corruption, drug trafficking, and crime. And also, the White House Correspondents Association, which has been fighting the good fight to maintain access to a White House that calls the press corps enemies of the people. These awards fit the mission of the National Press Club Journalism Institute to shine a light on barriers to press freedom in the U.S. and abroad, and to leverage the National Press Club's unique presence and resources to highlight global press freedom issues. Another part of our mission is to encourage future generations of public service journalists. Each year, we provide a number of scholarships, and I want to highlight our 2017 Diversity Scholarship Award winner. Her name is Tatiana Monet, and she is currently a student at the University of Missouri. The daughter of Haitian immigrants, she was working as co-editor of her high school newspaper when the administration tried to shut down a story she was working on to explain the conflict in Ferguson. She persisted. Yes, she persisted and succeeded in running the piece. Here's what she said when she received the Journalism Institute Diversity Scholarship. This particular recognition reinforces my commitment and focus to always encourage diversity wherever I go. As a journalist, I promise to write fair and balanced stories. I promise to be ethical in everything I do, especially when it's hard. And I promise to seek the truth no matter how ugly. Those are words to live by, Tatiana. Thank you. And now, please enjoy dinner, and afterward, we'll meet the rest of this year's honorees. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to make sure a great night like tonight is not possible without folks who frankly write the checks. And to make sure that we can fund scholarship, that we can support press freedom, that we can enjoy good journalism training, and make sure that the National Press Club Journalism Institute is where people come to when they want to acknowledge all of those important things. So, without further ado, we have 3 gold level sponsors tonight, 2 of which have been longtime supporters of the Journalism Institute. Bloomberg has been a generous supporter for many years. They've funded our Bloomberg classroom for electronic journalism right outside the ballroom. Reporters and editors affiliated with Bloomberg have been mainstays of the club, including several presidents. In fact, your next president is from Bloomberg. Toyota is one of our longtime and most loyal supporters. Many thanks to National Press Club Journalism Institute board member Ed Lewis of Toyota. So we count on him in so many ways to make the club the best it can be, the golf tournament and things like that, and tonight. And we welcome my employer, the Al Jazeera Media Network, as the 3rd gold level sponsor tonight. I appreciate that they've come to the table and supporting, as you've seen in the program, the very wonderful but very stark photo about demanding press freedom. That's extremely important to our network. Tonight's silver level sponsors, Brown Capital Management, who supported this dinner for a number of years. Our deepest thanks go to Eddie Brown. And National Press Club Journalism Institute board member Paul Meinhardt with Syngenta joins us as sponsors at silver level. Our bronze level supporters, the American Petroleum Institute and Zenith LG. So let's have a round of applause for all of our sponsors. And with that, I'm going to turn the podium back over to Barbara.
Thanks again, Jeff. We're going to move smartly along here and get right to the presentation of this year's John Aubuchon Press Freedom Award. Each year we present 2 awards, one domestic and one international, to journalists demonstrating the principles of press freedom and open government. In a minute, we'll touch on the challenges that American journalists have been facing, but first we want to focus on the dire situation of our colleagues just south of the border. This year saw the slayings of two prominent journalists in Mexico, Miroslava Breach Balducea, who was shot 8 times in front of one of her 3 children, and the other was Javier Valdez Cardenas. Patricia Mayorga, the winner of the Committee to Protect Journalists International Press Freedom Award, is currently in a safe house because of the death threats that she has received. Reporters Without Borders has classified Mexico as the deadliest country in the Western Hemisphere for the media. Despite this, Martin Mendez, a young journalist from Acapulco who fled after his reporting on public corruption led to death threats, spent months in an El Paso detention center while U.S. authorities reviewed his asylum case. Mendez entered the country legally, accompanied by an American asylum lawyer, but he was found by U.S. authorities to have credible fear of returning to his homeland and had the support of a wide range of U.S. journalism organizations, including the National Press Club. Nonetheless, he was shackled and treated like a criminal during 4 months of detention that he described as hell. Eventually, he gave up and returned to Mexico, where he's been in hiding. And Mexican journalist Emilio Gutierrez, who's here with us tonight, fled to the United States in 2008 after he received a report that Mexican military personnel were trying to kill him for his reporting. He received these death threats from the Mexican army after publishing a story about a robbery by military officers. Later, his home was raided by about 50 members of the military. He and his teenage son were detained by U.S. immigration authorities and held in separate detention facilities in Texas for 7 months before being released, pending the outcome of their asylum hearing. This past summer, his appeal for asylum for himself and his young son was denied. Journalists like these, who've been brave enough to expose public corruption and take on drug cartels, represent hope, not only for Mexico, but for its neighbors. The National Press Club and the Journalism Institute are proud to shine a light on the work being done by these brave Mexican journalists. Now, please turn your attention to the screens to learn more about tonight's honorees.
Pues a mi padre que se lo llevan por ser una persona con la cual no se le podía callar de otra manera.
Fue asesinado, lo asesinaron y apareció en las Chiapas.
Su única arma era su grabadora, su pluma y su libreta, su computadora, su teléfono, que eran sus herramientas de trabajo. Si lo único que nos queda es exigir justicia, pues hay que gritarlo. Justicia para cada periodista asesinado en este país. Muchas gracias.
Thanks to the Committee to Protect Journalists for that very moving videotape. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome journalist Emilio Gutierrez to accept on behalf of his own work and that of his colleagues in Mexico.
Buenas noches a todos.
Good evening, everyone.
Quiero agradecer esta invitación, atenta invitación.
I want to thank you all, first of all, for your very kind invitation.
He venido ante ustedes para hacer una breve biografía del dolor que el periodismo mexicano ha enfrentado a lo largo de más de una década.
I have come before you to make a short history of the pain and suffering that Mexican journalism has confronted for most of the past decade.
En donde los espíritus de libertad se han coartado de manera miserable por quienes deberían ser respetuosos de los principios de dignidad,
In which the spirits of liberty and freedom have been shredded in a miserable manner by those who should be respectful of the principles of dignity and of the universal right to inform and be informed.
En los últimos 17 años, la prensa en México ha sufrido los más grandes embates del Estado.
In the last 17 years, the Mexican press has suffered the greatest attacks from the state of Mexico.
El Estado ha tratado de minimizar su corrupción,
The state has tried to minimize its very high involvement of corruption
con la finalidad de mantenerse en la ilegitimidad y en la denigrada función pública.
with the goal of maintaining its illegitimacy and the denigration of the public role.
En este tiempo que se ha convertido en una eternidad,
In this time, in the 17 years, it has turned into an eternity, and it has turned into an eternity.
tenemos una contabilidad de 120 periodistas asesinados.
Some 120 Mexican journalists have been killed.
30 desaparecidos,
30 have disappeared.
decenas de obligados a ser migrantes
Dozens have had to flee,
y otros tantos más a autoexiliarse en este país y en otros.
and many others have had to self-exile either in the United States or in other countries.
Porque no hemos permitido ser una estadística del Estado fallido mexicano.
Because they did not want to become statistics in the state of Mexico that is in the state of Mexico.
Y porque no hemos querido ser parte de la nueva esclavitud que pretenden establecer en mi país.
And they did not want to become part of the new slavery that my country is now encouraging.
Ante las mentes claras, ante el atropello,
For the people who clearly see, who have clear minds about what is happening before this collision
por parte del gobierno disfrazado,
on the part of the government,
resulta que los verdugos son las víctimas.
it results in many of the journalists becoming victims.
México aporta la cuota mundial de periodistas asesinados sin una guerra oficial.
Mexico advertises to the world this number of journalists who have been murdered without actually declaring war on
Por-
journalists.
Porque así conviene a traidores y a oportunistas comerciales.
Because they support traders, the Mexican government supports traders and foreign commercial interests. It's in their best interest.
En este episodio estamos quienes nos hemos visto en una gran oscuridad,
In this situation, we find ourselves immersed in a great darkness,
en donde Doña Justicia se ventila con quienes deberían guardar los intereses de un ser humano.
where the absence of Lady Justice, Lady Justice is absent, and it should be she who is guarding the interests, the human rights interests of our people.
La impunidad en el 99% de los casos de asesinatos, desapariciones y exilios
Impunity, the presence of Lady Impunity in 99% of the cases of murder, and the murder cases.
es el dolor constante en nuestras familias.
The murder cases, the disappearances, and the exiles is a constant suffering and source of pain for our families.
Doña Impunidad no nos ha dejado de la mano.
Lady Impunity has not let go of our hand.
Mientras la justicia, Doña Justicia, se prostituye acompañada del Estado.
While Lady Justice prostitutes herself in the company of the government.
Los medios, para rematar la libertad de expresión,
To again kill the freedom of expression.
quienes buscamos asilo político en países como este,
Those who seek political asylum in countries like this, like the United States,
nos encontramos con la cerrazón de autoridades migratorias.
we encounter the decisions of immigration authorities
Que regatean las leyes internacionales.
that barter away the international laws.
En el caso propio, a 9 años y meses se nos ha negado la oportunidad de lograr el asilo político.
In my own case, after 9 years and some months, they denied me the opportunity, the judge denied me the opportunity to have political asylum, to grant my request for political asylum.
No por ello, desistimos en la creencia de la aplicación de las leyes migratorias internacionales.
Nonetheless, despite his decision, I am not setting aside my belief in the rule of law, in the international rule of law,
Que consagran la oportunidad de la vida.
that authorizes the opportunities in life.
Oportunidad que nos fue negada en nuestro país
Opportunities that we are denied in our own country, in Mexico.
y que hoy reclamo como el derecho humano y proclamado aquí, en este país, por las autoridades como una prioridad en el exterior, pero negada interiormente.
Even today, officials in this country are proclaiming human rights in foreign countries that foreign countries should grant, while in this country they're denied.
En este contexto, los periodistas mexicanos han optado por crear sus propios medios de comunicación ante la sociedad.
Within this context, Mexican journalists have opted to create their own centers of communication and means of communication to get their stories out.
Los medios de comunicación tradicionales, en su mayoría, son igual de corruptos que el gobierno.
The mainstream media in Mexico, the traditional means of communication, and the press in Mexico, the majority of them are as corrupt as the Mexican government.
Los medios de comunicación, esos tradicionales, viven de nuestros impuestos.
They live on our taxes. Taxes, T-A-X-E-S, taxes.
Para ensalzar la corrupción del gobierno.
To promote the government corruption.
Yo soy testigo de ello.
I am evidence of that.
Sin embargo, la autenticidad en nuestro trabajo nos une a pesar de la fragilidad con que se desarrolla.
In any case, the work that we do with authenticity is against the fragility of the circumstances in which we work.
Somos finalmente el barro con que se crea una nueva fase de libertad.
We are finally the clay which creates a new face of liberty.
Una oportunidad de creación y un derecho a informar y a ser informado.
An opportunity to create and a right to inform and to be informed.
Los periodistas mexicanos somos parte de la misma obra de barro.
Mexican journalists are part of that same clay.
Se podrá quebrar el trabajo, pero se perpetúa en busca de nuevos horizontes.
You can break us, but our work continues in search of new horizons.
Hoy quiero compartir un modesto homenaje a mis compañeros en infortunio.
I would like this evening to share a modest homage to my compatriots who have had the misfortune of practicing their craft and either being killed or kidnapped or having to go into exile.
Con una obra de alfarería que fue creada en un pueblo de Chihuahua que se llama Juan Mata Ortiz.
I would like to offer this homage with a piece of pottery created by Juan Mata Ortiz, who is from Chihuahua.
Con ello, pretendo realzar la importancia del trabajo periodístico que se realiza de una manera primaria porque somos parte del mismo barro con que se amasó esta obra. Sí.
This work is intended to realize the importance of journalism in whatever community as a primary need.
Si ustedes me permiten, quiero pedirles unos instantes de silencio en honor a mis compañeros asesinados, desaparecidos, exiliados, y porque nuestras familias encuentren a Doña Justicia que se ha extraviado y que se encuentra secuestrada a manos de un Estado genocida.
Please join me in a few moments of silence to honor those who have been murdered, who have been kidnapped, who have been exiled, who today are not with us because our families have encountered the kidnapping of justice at the hands of a genocidal state.
Mil gracias.
Many thanks.
Dios les bendiga.
That was just tremendous, and that beautiful vase will be very proudly displayed here at the Press Club, where everyone can see and remember what it stands for. So thank you so much. And also many thanks to Michelle Salcido for doing a fabulous job of interpreting for us. We really appreciate that. Thank you. So now we'll turn our attention to our award winners from a little closer to home. This year, the club and the Journalism Institute chose the White House Correspondents Association for its tireless and often thankless efforts to maintain lines of communication with the leaders of our government and standing up for public access, all while enduring insults, public ridicule, and not-so-veiled threats. It was truly an exercise in poise under pressure to maintain professionalism under those circumstances. Thanks to the hard work of the association's board, current President Margaret Talev and past President Jeff Mason, who's here with us tonight, the White House press room is still in the West Wing, briefings are still being conducted, and the public is still receiving the information they deserve about how government is operating in the name of the American people. We salute the work of journalists who can endure caustic attacks, sometimes the occasional manhandling or choking from those they cover while still performing their duty to inform the public. We also want to acknowledge the work of all beat reporters and the associations who represent them both in Washington and well beyond the Beltway. It's our great hope that this award will serve as a reminder to people in positions of power everywhere of the important role the Fourth Estate plays in our democracy. And now please welcome the president of the White House Correspondents Association, Margaret Talev, Chief White House Correspondent for Bloomberg.
Thanks, everybody. I want to thank, of course, the National Press Club and all of you here tonight for this award. And I also want to wish congratulations to Emilio and all of your colleagues, past and present, and to Tony and Michael as well. Look, it's an incredible honor to be able to accept this award on behalf of myself and all of the board, our past president Jeff Mason, Steve Thumb, our executive director, and the hundreds of White House correspondents and their teams who go to work every day and do this work. What we do does not compare in terms of risk or danger to what many journalists around the world do, including what Emilio's been through. And I think Emilio's experience reminds us how lucky we are that we can come to work every day, and even though things have gotten a little weird lately and are challenging in a way that they haven't been, before for us in decades, that we can still report freely without real fear of our lives. And while that's true, I think also what we hear from Emilio's experience reminds us of how fragile that is and how important it is not to take it for granted. To balance not getting sucked into debates that are diversions against the need to stand up for what we all know is an incredibly important pillar of American democracy and Western democracy, and something, rights and liberties that are really very fleeting. So. I think it's also true that some of these major galvanizing national events and tragedies that we've had really just in the last couple of weeks, the hurricanes, the damage in Puerto Rico, the tragedy that has unfolded in Las Vegas. We've seen Americans all across the country turn instinctively to the mainstream media to get news, information that they trust, whether it's visual, whether it's text, whether it's a radio report, online, print, television, pictures. That's still there. And yet there are questions or concerns that a lot of Americans have about trusting the media, and I think it's important for us to pay attention to those. This is an opportunity for us to reconnect with our readers and our viewers and our listeners in forgotten parts of the country, and it's a mandate to do that. It's really, really important, and I think it's something that we're all conscious of. I think we're also conscious of how important it is for all of us reporters who cover Washington, who cover government, who cover politics, who cover America, to be united and to be talking to each other. And we really appreciate your gesture to us tonight to do that, and we really want to reciprocate. And I think the WHCA this year and our members are committed to a lot more networking and interaction and ongoing conversations with journalists all around the country and in Washington and everyone in this room. So I really want to thank everybody for this award tonight on behalf of all of our members, and to raise a glass, which I left over there, to the First Amendment, to the American people, and to the continued strength of journalism today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Amelia. Now you know why we do this. So congratulations to tonight's Aubuchon Award winners. I think they deserve another round of applause. Now we're going to lighten it up a little bit. The moment you've been waiting for. Our tribute to Tony, Kornheiser, and Michael Wilbon. So we're going to begin with a video that highlights their now 16 years together as ESPN's Emmy Award-winning television show co-host of Pardon the Interruption. So with that, we're going to roll a tape, and I'm going to come back to the podium.
Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon, and welcome to opening day in this bizarre television experiment.
And I'm Tony Kornheiser, and if we can have a TV show, you can have a TV show.
I have stood for 30-plus years in front of lockers of guys who've had crushing defeats. Ernest Biner comes to mind, Fred Brown in Georgetown, the whole Michael Jordan pass. Michael Jordan, athletes more important to this culture and greater than Cam Newton. And they knew how to behave like professional grown men in defeat. He was an embarrassment. He's a great player. He won in college. He may win, but Tony, he behaved like a loser. He's so brilliant. People go to YouTube, watch Ali's fights.
So I'm watching all the coverage, and I'm listening to people in their 30s talk about him. And they're saying things like, and nobody gave him a chance against Liston. There's a reason for that. Sonny Liston was the baddest man on the planet.
Just as a person who has had controversy swirling around him, remember the old Charlie Brown, the Peanuts character, Pigpen, who always had just the dust and dirt swirling around him? Roger Goodell reminds me of that right now. It's been going on for like more than a year.
Really?
It's a cloud. It's just a cloud of just stuff swirling. Doesn't he have the Roger Goodell's a really smart guy. He's not smart enough to recuse himself. He's not smart enough to say we're going to get somebody else to do this like he did with Bountygate with Paul Tagliabue. What are you doing?
This is so fantastic that you've just compared him to Pigpen. It's just
like that.
It like exceeds everything
right?
you have ever said about him. I like that. More important than standing for a song is the right that we have in this country, and maybe unlike any other country, to free speech and to assembly. And that does not make you a son of a bitch. Could you foresee down the road that research would ultimately lead to the outlawing of football, or would we put it on barges the way they used to do with boxing?
My suspicion is that football is going to wither away rather than be banned. I mean, look, what self-respecting parent is going to let their kid play high school football knowing that the sport has this kind of impact on the brain? I mean, are you kidding me?
I guess there's a notion out there you have no soul. Do you want to set that on the record right now?
I have a huge soul. Of course I have a soul. Very close to my family. I have a strong soul.
Good to know, but is it a dark soul, do you think?
I'm buying tickets right now. Just off that, Michael. I want tickets right now.
I bet you are. I bet you are, dude.
I am. I promise
I love
you.
talking to your guys.
All right, from the NFL, we now turn to the world of NASCAR. People who weren't sure what to think of NASCAR are more sure today after a NASCAR driver released bigoted and ignorant statements on his podcast.
All right, what's up, NASCAR fans? I don't know about y'all, but this President Obama is pissing me off. So I'm gonna do some dip and speak my mind. I found out this Obama wants to put a bigger tax on gasoline. What the f***'s up with that?
Well, if you ask me, that's all the proof we need that NASCAR really is just for the poor and the stupid.
To Tony, Mike, and all the knuckleheads at BTI, congratulations on a great 10 years.
We worked together for 22 years at the Washington Post before anybody said you should be on television, which we both thought was a joke.
Well, yeah.
And whose idea was it to pair you on television?
Mark Shapiro.
Mark Shapiro, when he was running ESPN,
He saw you and he said, oh, these guys would be great.
What he wanted to do, ESPN at that point did not have a commentary show, did not have an opinion show. And he felt that if you're going to have an opinion show, which he thought the network needed, it would be great to have it from Washington, D.C., because that's where all the Sunday talk shows, the political shows are from, that are opinion shows.
Right.
And he'd seen us work together on a variety of ESPN things and thought it would be a good idea.
He said the first thing he was going to do, if ever promoted to a level high enough, was put us on TV. And I said, the second thing you're going to do is be fired.
Oh, you were skeptical.
Well,
we were both skeptical.
You know, I have mirrors in my house. We didn't think we looked like television people. The late, great Howard Cosell once actually said these words to me: "Don't you realize you're unsightly?" So
he was a very handsome man himself.
Absolutely, with good hair. So the first deal we got was a 3-year deal, 2 years guaranteed, and 1 year at the option of the network. And I said, let's take this. They're going to fire us in 3 weeks.
How many mirrors, Tony? 16. Oh, wow. Oh. Well, you have plenty of opinion shows now, huh, John? And a little bit of, opinions on the other side coming back, huh? You know, former Washington Post sports columnist Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon have co-hosted Pardon the Interruption since 2001 on ESPN, one of cable television's most watched studio shows. Pardon the Interruption has twice won Sports Emmy Awards for Outstanding Daily Studio Show. Both top flight, that deserves a round of applause. Both top flight journalists. They first joined forces at the Washington Post, as you saw, in the 1980s, and went on to branch into radio, books, sports commentary at ESPN. Now, each has enjoyed an individual trajectory of expertise and success, but the pairing of their sensibilities and humor makes them a team. Individually and collectively, these two share a lifetime of achievement in their profession of sports reporting. That's what this award is about. It's about a lifetime of achievement. Something in this current highly charged political atmosphere that continues to speak to critical issues of the day. Because no matter what part of the world, what walk of life, what background or personal story, everyone comes together with sports, even if it's to disagree over the play. It's not just statistics or balls or pucks or touchdown passes, cracks of the bat. Sport is at the heart of our daily conversation, with controversial stories like the one playing out on social media and elsewhere between the NFL and the White House about protesting police brutality against people of color. These issues intersect with what's going on in the rest of society. And the two people we honor tonight are so great at bringing these stories to the conversation with civility and healthy debate. It's never personal, rather a lively conversation, as you saw, in a healthy sort of barbershop, beauty salon, corner bar, did you see that play kind of way. They take the most complex of subjects and make them simple to understand. With an innovative broadcast format which has changed the landscape. If you watched Pardon the Interruption and you watch local newscasts or network newscasts, the Pardon the Interruption is an innovator. That's part of the reason why they were chosen, because they've changed how we do business. The sharp visuals, the lively interviews. And these guys are very humble. When I called them, they didn't want to come. True story. It's past his bedtime. And Mike reads the bedtime story, right? Now, you know, when they don't brag about their countless acts of kindness, their mentorship to junior colleagues, so much philanthropy that they've done. I can tell you that when the word went out that Tony and Mike were the recipients that are being bestowed the award this year, people lit up like Christmas trees. I mean, Bob Woodward over here, he said, I can't wait to come here. It was phenomenal. So there are some people like Bob. We've assembled a great crew to my left and right here to roast them. So let's hear from a few of them now. Our first speaker is a sign of Washington journalism. He is chairman of the board of Graham Holdings Company and was publisher of the Washington Post newspaper from '79 until 2000, and became chairman of the paper until 2008. And 4 years ago, he co-founded the Dream US, the nation's largest college access and success program for dreamers. His philanthropic spirit and contributions have opened countless opportunities to the immigrant youth community across the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, first up on the lineup, Don Graham.
Look, I don't want to violate the spirit of this occasion, but I do want to say to Emilio Gutierrez, all of us are honored to be in your presence tonight, and you spoke so eloquently for your colleagues. Thank you. And now I move on to a more challenging subject. I've waited all these years to tell the truth about Kornheiser and Wilbon, and they give me 3 minutes. But these are going to be 3 important minutes for each of you. So I don't want to say Tony has been in this town a long time, but I remember the first time I had a call from the White House about him. They called to say, you know, the president really likes Tony's work. Well, it seemed like an obvious question. I said, yeah, but what about Mrs. Coolidge? So, John Skipper, the head of ESPN, one of the later speakers, called me when Tony and Mike moved there full time. He said, "How did you manage Tony at the Post? He's so temperamental all the time." I said, "What are you talking about? The guy's a pussycat. He couldn't do enough for you. He just ate out of George's hand. He was saying all the time, 'I'd like to do more.' Now, Wilbon, he's a monster." Yeah. So I'm going to tell you the true stories of two of the most famous occasions in my life, starting with the time in 2001 when Tony and Mike came to me and said, "Don, we have this crazy offer from ESPN. We sincerely want your advice. You're an older guy. We trust you about the show." And I said, "God, I'm so glad you asked me. Look, newspapers are the future." I said, "You want to be with a good, solid business. You know, take it from me, TV is heartless. Why do they want you? You're young, you're great looking. Suppose one of you, say, becomes bald. They're going to chew you up and spit you out. And, you know, Wilbon, you know, they know you come from the big athletic factory. They don't want you. They want to get close to Northwestern. You know, that's the story. What if they're not so great one year, you know?" So they left, and I really missed those guys, and I started thinking, what made them so special? Tony was part of this collection, you know, of great writers who, you know, fancied themselves as great writers at the Post. And I've worked with some of the greatest writers in America. And what made, you know, one thing made Tony different. A lot of those great writers like to, you know, write. So George and I remember when Tony's column started at 1,000 words, and then he announced that because of his TV and radio commitments, he couldn't do that anymore, so he was going to 500, and then I think he went to 50. So this is a true story. Tony is the actual inventor of Twitter. They decided to start Twitter when Tony's column went to 144 characters. So as a gift tonight, the Press Club has given each of you a collection of Tony's written words over the last 10 years, and here it is. This was a dangerous occasion tonight because, of course, it's the first time Tony's been up after 9 o'clock in 10 years. And having a reception and having Wilbon out there, the presumption was that he would still be shaking hands with the waiters and the copy aides and the people in the hallway until 11. And getting the two of them together was difficult. I have to say one serious word, although it pains me, which is to thank Tony and Mike for their help with me over the years in raising money for the DC College Access Program, which Tony and Mike jointly, and then Mike individually, helped do for so many years. And Wilbon is ridiculously big-hearted and generous to kids like him who grew up lacking total opportunity and has never forgotten and will never forget. And I admire him so much for that. Pains me to say that. Now, finally, I said I would talk to you about two of the really big occasions in my life. So for the last 4 years, what have people wanted to know from me? Two things. They wanted to know, one, why did you sell the Post to Jeff Bezos? And two, why in the world did Jeff Bezos want to buy a newspaper after he already owned Amazon? Why do you want to buy the Post? And I want to talk about the answer to the second question. And it involves actually a small misunderstanding. So Jeff and I went through, of course, a long negotiation. This was a business deal. We exchanged documents. We hired lawyers. We discussed terms. Finally, we reached an agreement, we shook hands, and we signed the final papers. And then Jeff turned to me and he said, "Okay, now I get to fire Kornheiser and Wilbon, right?"
Thanks, Tom. And we're just getting started. So, our next speaker, as I hinted earlier, is a true legend in our profession. A reporter for the Washington Post since 1971, where he and Carl Bernstein made history with their coverage of the Watergate scandal in their book, All the President's Men, and their follow-up, The Final Days. Since then, he has won nearly every American Journalism Award and covered other landmark events, including the September 11th terrorist attacks, as well as authoring another 18 nonfiction books. Let's see what he knows about sports. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you a video from Bob Woodward. And then video first, and then we'll come to you.
They stop it?
You want to stop there? You want to do the video? Okay, well, hold on.
I thought I wanted to explain
Okay.
before we get to the video. Now, Tony and Michael, over the years, have made many mistakes, as we know. The biggest mistake is leaving the Washington Post. As you know, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. He is one of the richest men in the world. He could have bought you. And as we know, Bezos has expanded a great deal. He's bought Whole Foods. It's going to be announced tomorrow. It's been a couple of hard days for the State Department, so Bezos is going to buy the State Department. And Tillerson will stay on. But we're in this era of Twitter and Facebook and impatience and speed. And I thought to find out what really goes on in the life of Tony and Michael, that we had to use the old method. And so bless Matt Kelleher, who's one of the producers at their show, and Chris Gavin, who filmed this. We made a video, and we were able to find deep interruption. We are here in Michael Wilbon's garage to meet with deep interruption. Kornheiser and Wilbon are, summarize for me.
They're show ponies. We feed them with stats and research and talking points, and then they go out there and they just perform them.
And they're clowns, aren't they?
A little bit. I think that's a good word to use. Yeah, clowns.
Yeah. A lot of people around feel it's just embarrassing to know them. Imagine how it must feel to actually work for them. Of course, ESPN, it's kind of heading out of business, isn't it?
It's not good. It's not good. And these guys are riding that train right down to the bottom.
Wilbon, you know, he presents himself as kind of the calm intellectual. Is he?
He presents himself as that. Yes, he does.
What is he?
What is he? He's someone who flies off the handle whenever the Cubs lose one single game, screaming at the pitcher, throw strikes, throw strikes. We have to get him to calm down so we can focus on his work.
So he's taking sides. He's not
Sure.
neutral.
Oh, no way.
One of the things that shocked me in Tony's radio show, he objected to bicyclists being on the road with him and actually said, run them down. Sounded like Donald Trump.
Yeah. He said, just give him a tap. Just give him a little tap on the back wheel.
I think this was 2006. Tony was still working at the Washington Post, writing columns, wasn't he?
Yeah, he called them columnettes. They were about 3 or 4 paragraphs.
And then he did Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Tony, what were the reviews?
Poor
Yeah.
is the word I would use. Yeah, the
Yeah, you're
reviews were
being
poor.
charitable,
Yes, I'm trying.
deep interruption. Paul Farley gave a mild criticism of Tony's performance on Monday Night Football, just said it wasn't his usual witty, informed self, and then Tony called him a putz. And
Yeah, you should have heard what he said off air.
what did he say off?
Oh, much worse things. I don't even think I can say them to you. I'd be
Okay,
too embarrassed
because
to say
the
them.
ombudsman said putz is a Yiddish word for the male sex organ. There was a kind of a storm about this, and Tony got one of the sports editors at the Post to lie for him and saying Tony didn't mean any offense. What do you think?
I think he meant 100% offense.
You know, it's just like Nixon, isn't
Sure.
it? What you
He becomes
see.
obsessed, totally becomes obsessed with his enemies, yes.
Yeah. Tell me the story of Tony's aviophobia,
Yeah,
fear
so he said.
of flying. What is
Yeah.
that?
He wanted a bus. He wanted a bus with a personal butler that could drive him around the country in leisure and style.
So he's like a prince, isn't he?
Yeah, prima donna.
I understand in the case of Wilbon, they call him an award-winning
Yeah.
journalist. And
I don't know any awards.
you went to Wilbon's house one
Sure.
day, and you had to use the washroom.
Yes.
And you went
Wow,
in.
we found this story. Wow.
And then what happened? You had to.
Well, there was a timer and then a bell, and if you stayed in there too long, the bell went off and you were forced to leave. It was
I mean,
degrading.
the lights went out,
Yes.
the toilet seat came down,
Yes.
and
Yeah, and then
the
it
door
didn't matter
flew
where
open.
you. Yeah, it doesn't matter what point of the process you were in. That's it. You have to leave.
Did they get along?
Do they get along?
Yes.
Those two?
Yeah.
No, they have to have separate dressing rooms. We have to keep them apart at all times. They haven't been on speaking terms since 2009.
A lot of this is in plain sight. So how do we get the egos that these two guys have back in the bottle?
We expose them.
Yes, the truth.
That's right. Follow the predictions.
Follow the predictions.
That's right. Just go to the tape, watch what they say. People are going to finally understand that they've been propped up by research and stats and talking points for years. But then they go out on their own and they make these predictions, and that's when the trouble starts. That's when they begin to become exposed.
Let's go to the videotape.
We begin today with what may have been the beginning of mortality for Tom Brady. You going there already? He did not look good. He missed open receivers throughout the entire game.
Brady lets it fly. Caught! Gronkowski! Brady floats into the end zone. Touchdown! Brady pump. Brady rifles to the corner. Oh, it's caught! Touchdown! Incredible! Tom Brady delivers in the clutch.
I think Judge, as great as he is going to cool off. He could be the MVP, Rookie of the Year. He could be everything. He could lead them to everything. He's not hitting 50.
Deep to left field. Going back Cabrera. Looking up. See ya. He's done it. Home run number 50. No rookie has ever hit 50 home runs in a season till Aaron Judge right now.
Griffin's debut was the most exciting debut by any athlete in this city for 20 years. This is the era of unbridled optimism.
Bad snap. It belongs to Seattle. And Robert Griffin III
is down on the ground and can't get up.
This is caused just by Robert dropping the football. Didn't look like anybody, no, he's down. Didn't look like anybody hit the ball. But this is something we've seen way too many times in the last 3 years.
I like Cleveland now. I like the
Why?
Browns.
Why?
I got the Browns winning their division.
That's insane.
They get it off. The kick is no good. He missed it. And Cleveland's long string of futility finally ends on Christmas Eve here in Cleveland.
If you are Sharapova, you might not be in the best shape after not playing a lot over the last 2 years. I'd still give Halep a good chance in this match.
But if, I think she'll probably win the match.
Right.
This wasn't for the trophy tonight, but you wouldn't know it from Sharapova's reaction.
Cowboys and Cardinals, who you got?
You know I'm going with my people in the desert. You know I'm going with the Cardinals to lay one on the Cowboys tonight.
First and goal from the 8. Elliott, a little hesitation and a touchdown. That's a clinic.
Which of the top 3 do you think will make the best pro? Best pro.
I'd gladly take any of the 3 of them,
Well,
but
that's
I am a
chicken.
Carmelo Anthony guy.
If Darko Max is out, I believe he's the best of the bunch because he's fluid, he's 7 feet. You can't teach 7 feet. He could be 7'2". When it's over, he's only 17.
That's right.
What if he was Kevin Garnett,
I'd take
but
it.
better and bigger?
Cleveland! This is for you! Oh!
And that was all she wrote. More agony for Melo and the Knicks.
Somebody has to be a boss. I told that. I need the one. You guys relax. I'll be the one.
Wow. This is just getting better and better, isn't it? Hard to follow that one. Just go to the garage or his garage. So, our next speaker is the president and co-chairman of a company that's very much been in the spotlight lately and on the receiving end of ire from the White House. ESPN, part of Disney Media Networks. Under his leadership, ESPN has secured a global leadership position in competitive sports media landscape and enjoys unparalleled television and digital success in sports media. Please welcome Tony and Mike's boss, John Skipper.
So I'm actually the 110th president of ESPN, and apparently the last. I want to announce a new silent auction item. We have a 190,000 square foot digital studio in Bristol, Connecticut, which we'll be taking bids on later in the program. PTI with Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser debuted on ESPN on October 22nd, 2001. Just about 16 years ago. There have been about 3,500 shows. Both Mike and Tony have done about 3,000, which means their truancy rate is about 15%. Now, if you decided you wanted to watch all of those shows, which would be an odd desire, but if you did, if you started on January the 1st of any given year at 8 a.m. and watched all their shows continuously, you would finish up given about 8 hours of sleep each night on April the 4th, about 11:30 p.m. And what you would see is a startlingly consistent discussion of sports that is smart, informed, thoughtful, funny, nuanced, witty, creative, and highly entertaining. It is not hyperbolic to suggest, I missed the roast part of this, by the way, if you didn't figure it out. It is not hyperbolic to suggest that the aggregate PTI represents the best ongoing national sports discussion in the history of sports. Now, I would be remiss, and I know that you'll indulge me in this, if I did not acknowledge Eric Rydholm and Matt Kelleher. And in fact, the entire occupants of table 15 and table 16, which is the PTI staff. All that stuff you talked about graphics and lineups and witticisms and visualizations happened from those guys collaborating with these guys. They were fortunate from table 15, 16 to be working with very unique talents. Tony and Mike had phenomenal chemistry. It is intangible, but it is omnipresent, and it is invaluable in sports television to have that kind of chemistry. They were yin and yang. Yin, the guy who woke up worrying. Yang, the guy who strolled into the daily meeting at some unknown time. Ying, the guy who never saw a plane that he liked. Yang, the guy who never saw a plane to L.A. he would miss. Or Cheryl, right? But what they had in common were intellect, curiosity, hard work, and years of reporting and writing at the Washington Post, which gave them the grounding, the skills, and the fundamental knowledge to make sports fans smarter. And they had the wit and the quip to entertain while doing so. For 16 years, PTI has been required viewing for the smart and the sophisticated sports fan. PTI is a show not to be missed, and consequently, and consistently is the most DVR'd studio program that ESPN has. Lastly, despite Tony's assertion about unsightliness, they're lovely guys. Really lovely guys. And it has been my honor and my privilege and a great pleasure to work with you 12 of those 16 years. It really has been wonderful. And I will tell you, as the president of ESPN, on behalf of my colleagues, many of you are here tonight, that we love you. We love you. And we are exceptionally happy for you to get this well-deserved honor. So we're happy to share it with you. Thank you very much.
And to inject yet another sports metaphor, running anchor on this it's not 4x4 or 5x5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyway, you get the picture. The anchor on the relay is none other than popular television personality with three consecutive successful talk shows on the air. Fox's A Current Affair, Paramount's The Maury Povich Show, and now NBC Universal's Maury. In case you haven't figured out who I'm talking about, it's Maury Povich. So, as he comes to the podium, the son of legendary Washington sports columnist Shirley Povich, a 1995 Fourth Estate honoree, Maury started his career right here in Washington, covering news and sports at WTGG. I used to work there a long time ago. During the 60s and 70s, he hosted the landmark 2-hour program Panorama, a precursor to so many talk programs today. He's a very generous supporter of journalism education programs, and it's my pleasure to bring up Maury Povich. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. What the hell am I doing here? We have a Vietnam War veteran, a DC cop, former sports editor of the Washington Post, publisher of the Post, and that's just Donnie Graham, and I'm here. I shouldn't be here. I know Kornheiser and Wilbon invited me here, said to me, I'm their second choice. I said, well, that's great. Who the shit was your first choice? And they said, Obama. And I said, let's get this straight. The 44th president and a trashy talk show host. Not working. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen, what you have done. There have been 44 recipients of this prestigious award. Walter Cronkite, Teddy White, Scotty Reston, Eric Severide, Helen Thomas, David Broder, Carl Rowan, Bob Woodward, and Kornheiser and Wilbon. They haven't written a damn thing in the 21st century. I mean, we talked about Tony's 80-word columns. Michael hasn't written a column for the Post in 7 years and writes for something called ESPN.com and trying to get millennials who would prefer Barstool and Deadspin. And unfortunately, I've known him for 35 years, first through my father, then George Solomon, their longtime editor at the Post, who's had to deal with those water-cooling clashes from 1979 to 2001. Tony hasn't been to a night sporting event since Monday Night Football. He goes to sleep every night at 9 in the 5th inning of his beloved Nationals game. By the way, Wilbon, on the other hand, does not sleep. He is out having late-night dinners with every major sports star he can suck up to so that he can drop the name the next day on Pardon the Interruption. I mean, they showed up both at the Post in '79 and on two kind of different levels. I mean, believe it or not, Tony was a journalist. He was a reporter. He worked at Newsday, he worked at the New York Times, and he was hired as a reporter in the sports section and style. And then Michael came same year as an intern from Northwestern, wide-eyed, eager. And the story goes, in fact, that one of Michael's first assignments was he's supposed to go to RFK Stadium and cover a high school all-star game. And he was so excited. And 2 minutes before the game ended, the lights went out. And the game ended. And so Michael calls the night editor. You know, these night editors are crusty night editors. And so he says, what am I supposed to do? I got no lights. I can't do anything. I can't write. He says, light a match, file your copy, and get the hell out of there. And Michael had to climb a fence at RFK Stadium in order to get out of there. You know, Michael likes to tell the story that one of his first assignments was to cover, I think it was an early Sugar Ray Leonard closed-circuit telecast in the early 80s. And he's going with my father to the telecast, and he's all nervous. It's his first time he's ever covered a fight. And so Michael says to my father, Shirley, I'm really nervous. This is the first fight I've ever covered. And so my father says, don't worry about it, Michael. I was really nervous the first time I had to cover my first boxing fight. And Michael says, so what was that, Shirley? He says, Dempsey Tunney. Michael's never been the same since. Tony, by the way, got his first column, and it was a humor column. So my father is a very proper kind of a guy, who, by the way, was a recipient of your award 22 years ago, and I was here, and he really loved that award. He just cherished it. And so my father, as Don and Bob know, a very proper kind of a guy. He always went to the office. He had a tie and jacket. And so Tony gets this humor column. And my father, after he sees it a couple of weeks, walks into George Solomon's office, closes the door, and says, George, no one can sustain humor week to week. It's not funny. Get rid of it. Walks out, closes the door. George is perplexed. He's never heard this from my father. 2 months later, my father comes back, opens the door. George closes the door. I was wrong. Tony's really funny. That was the highest compliment. Kornheiser has been called by one commentator the wittiest sports columnist in the country. Amazingly, it's an anonymous quote. Boy, isn't Wikipedia great. And Michael was known as the best deadline writer in sports. Another anonymous quote. They argued all the time. That led to Pardon the Interruption, which, you know, a vice president of ESPN, of course, took credit for that. They're Emmy Award winners, as we know. Tony gripes when Michael is off on all of his trips because the show's on a split screen, and Tony thinks the ratings are going to go down. And it's ridiculous because John will attribute this to this. Other than any sporting event on television, Pardon the Interruption is the highest rated show on ESPN. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Kornheiser, Michael Wilbon.
Thank you, Maury, and many, many thanks to our speakers tonight for such wonderful moments about and thoughts about tonight's honorees. I think what's resonated throughout the evening is not only the sheer breadth of sports knowledge and analysis these two have demonstrated on a daily basis, but their sense of humor, their sense of humanity, and a wisdom that sports are often the perfect analogy for life, as well as the perfect anecdote for when times are tough. We thank them for their tireless contributions to the conversation, to the game, to the common experience of life on and off the field. Now, as was mentioned, the first recipient of this award was Walter Cronkite, whose grandson, I might add, is a member, setting a standard for excellence and integrity that has been matched every year with each new Fourth Estate honoree. You've heard the list: Tom Brokaw, Bob Schieffer, Andrea Mitchell, Tom Friedman, Christian Amanpour, the late Gwen Eiffel, and last year's recipient, Wolf Blitzer. Gentlemen, we couldn't be happier to add your names to this illustrious list of Fourth Estate Award honorees. So now, please join me in welcoming Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon to the podium.
Okay, I'm going to talk first. Mike's going to talk after me because, as has been said many times, it's very late. I got to go home. So I'm going to slip out when he starts to talk. I want to thank everybody who roasted us. I particularly want to, I'll just say this, I want to thank John Skipper, but I particularly, with no slight to Skipper, I want to thank Don Graham and Bob Woodward and Maury Povich, because at my age, I'm rarely around people older than I am if I'm not in an assisted living home. So it was nice to see them here. I want to thank everybody who has come here, friends and family and workers at the Washington Post and workers at PTI. I want to thank the people who came down from Bristol. With the way people are cutting the cord, that must have felt like the last chopper out of Saigon. We're doing well, aren't we? And I'm sure that Wilbon and I will have to pay for all of their trips at some point. It'll come out of our salaries. I also, because Maury is here, I'm reminded of this. The socialite Alan Bubis is here. Gary Williams is here. If you did not like dinner tonight, or you're still hungry because this has been a long night.
Here we go. Here's a plug. Here's a plug.
If you want a nightcap, please go to Chatter at the corner of Wisconsin Avenue Northwest and Jennifer Street Northwest. We're a full-service restaurant, and we are for-profit. Thank you very much. I will tell you briefly the story of how I came to learn about this particular award. And about 2 months ago, Mike comes to me and he says, the University Club wants to give us an award. And I go, for what? And he goes, I don't know, sports. And I say, well, what are we going to get? And he goes, I don't know, maybe a plaque. I said, well, what do we have to do? And he said, well, we have to make a speech. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. I mean, I'm sick of hearing myself talk. Why don't you do it and pick up my plaque? 3 or 4 days later, Tracy Roberts, who was the stage manager at PTI, the most essential person in my life, I cannot get from point A to point B without Tracy Roberts. I love her dearly. She comes in and she says, what a great honor that the National Press Club is giving you a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I said, what are you talking about? Wilbon said it was the University Club. He says, Wilbon's an idiot. It's the National Press Club, and it's incredibly prestigious, and you have to go, which is pretty much why I'm here. And 2 things occur to you when you get an award like this. The first one is, it's a Lifetime Achievement Award, which means they think you're going to die soon. And they want to make sure they can sell tables in your name soon. And the second thing that occurs to you is, well, we're not worthy. We're honestly, we're not journalists now. We're show monkeys. That's what we do. And we used to be journalists, but we were sports writers. And we were proud to be sports writers, but a big scoop in sports writing would be, I might call Matt Rennie at the desk, and I might say, I'm at the Palm, and Riggins is really drunk. I don't think he can play tomorrow. That's not like Watergate, is it, Bob? That's really not. But then I looked around, and as it was said, and I got to last year, and Wolf Blitzer went on, come on. Come on. We can do this. And you're saying, well, why are you knocking Wolf? I love Wolf Blitzer. My high school classmate, Steven Scheinberg, was his fraternity brother at Buffalo. I can give you Wolf Blitzer stories all night long. So we're here to do this, and Mike has only worked at the Washington Post as a newspaper. I've worked at the New York Times, where I worked with great reporters Neil Amder and Murray Chass and Paul Montgomery. I started at Newsday, where I worked for John Walsh. Who's here. I worked for him for 19 days. He took a job at Rolling Stone where he met Skipper, and that was the end of everything other than him and Skipper. And I worked with Steve Jacobson and Joe Gergen and Bill Knack, and I worked at the Washington Post, and many of these people are here. And nobody in our lives, nobody meant more to our career than George Solomon, our sports editor. Nobody did. It has been said of George Solomon, and I know because I'm the one who said it, that the only thing he knows about good writing is he can't do it. But he had an unerring eye for talent. He hired you. He hired me. He hired a lot of people in this room. He hired a lot of people that are now working at ESPN and at all the great newspapers in the country, and he was great about that. And George tried to ruin my career single-handedly. Lenny Shapiro, who's here, Lenny Shapiro, 12, 14 years ago, wanted to write a column saying that I would be good on Monday Night Football, and George spiked the column, didn't let it run, because he was afraid somebody might give me the job. Skipper did. I was a disaster. George was right. So good for George on that. He tried to kill Wilbon physically. He would say to Wilbon, why don't you go down and why don't you cover Miami, Notre Dame, Catholics versus convicts, national sports implications. Why don't you do that? Do that. And on the way, because it's close, and on the way, why don't you go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which is only like 1,000 miles away? Why don't you do that and write a feature on Alabama? And because the Notre Dame game is on Saturday, on Sunday, because it's on your way home, and the Redskins have to play Green Bay in 3 weeks, why don't you go to Green Bay and cover the Packers against the Eagles? And people say to me, you know, why is Wilbon off your show so much? I said, because it's in his DNA to keep going places, because George Solomon sent him to all these places. I'll tell you the one great George Solomon story, which is the Rays story. George would call you in once a year, and he'd say, shut the door. And as Maury said before, George doesn't shut the door. That door is always open. He'd say, shut the door, sit down. You go, oh, this must be important. And he goes, I'm going to tell you something you can't tell anybody. You cannot tell anybody. Wow, what is this?
Big raise?
Yeah, he said, nobody knows. I'm going to give you a raise. Nobody knows. What do you mean nobody knows? Don doesn't know. Don signs the checks. Don owns the... Don doesn't know. I got this for you. I'm giving you a raise. You've earned it. How much? $10 a week. I go, George, after taxes, that's $7. I can't park in the lot for an hour. He goes, you don't want it? I'll take it. Let's bring him up here to talk about us, George Solomon.
And while George comes up, Tony and I do owe George more than we can ever repay. He hired each of us in 1979. Tony away from New York, me as an intern. I trust that it helped make up for hiring John Jr. Feinstein in 1978. George, all yours.
The reason I wasn't at the head table but was still asked to speak is I ate at their restaurant twice last month. Had I been there a third time, I would have gotten the gavel. But I don't know what to make of those comments, but what I will say is that they started this madness about 25 years ago at the Post, and their offices were adjoining. One side was Wilbon, one side was Kornheiser, and they would scream at each other for hours. And next to the sports department was Outlook. And the Outlook editor, very quiet and dignified, came to me and said, is there a way you can ask them to be quiet? And I said, no. And the next day they moved. And they were replaced by, get this, Book World. So about 2 weeks later, the book editor came in and said, is there a way you can get them just to be quiet a little bit? And I said, no. And 2 weeks later, they moved. And they were replaced by the investigative reporting team. And the investigative reporting editor, Jeff Lean, came to me and said, I'm not going to ask. And he stayed. So that was it. Real quick, I'll tell a quick story on how the Post hired both these guys. Kornheiser, Shelby Coffey was the editor of Style, and I went to New York and to recruit Kornheiser, who was at the New York Times writing endless features no one was reading. But they were pretty good if you would read selected paragraphs. And a week later, you would finish, but they were okay, and and as Don said many times, you gotta fill the paper. So, so Shelby and I we asked Kornheiser, where do you want to go? And he says, Chris Sella. And we go in there, and the menu was ridiculous, and Shelby and I each ordered iced tea, and Kornheiser ordered a steak. And so we invited him down, and here was the deal. We would split the ownership of Kornheiser. I'd get him for half the time for a month, and Shelby Coffey and Style would get him the second month. So he comes down, and we take him to a restaurant, Romeo and Juliet on K Street. And we asked Ben Bradley and Sally Quinn to join us, figured that would sew the deal. And it did. Especially when the woman who cooked came out and said, this was for you, Tony. And Tony did come. And here's the way it worked with me and Shelby. Tony would write for sports for 2-3 weeks, and I'd call Shelby up, and I said, you got to take him off my hands. And he'd write for Style for 2-3 weeks, and Shelby would call me up and said, please, take him. And that's the way that worked. Wilbon was less complicated. He was an intern for 2 summers. In between the summer, he went back to Northwestern, and he used to string for the Post. And he would cover, the Bulls, the Bears, everything. And it was a pretty good deal for me because I was paying him $25 an article, and which he now gets a lot more than $25 an article. But at the end of his internship, and this is the way the Post used to work, we didn't have a position. And I went to Ben Bradley and I said, we got to keep this guy, but I have no, what we used to call slots. I have no slot. I'll tell you what I'll do. I owe you one. Well, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, Ben passed away, and I still owed him the slot. But it was the best debt I ever incurred, and I want to say this sincerely. They were great for me. They were great for the Post. Now they're great for ESPN, and they're great for you. And for that, you know, I'm grateful to have worked with them.
I'm gonna be brief, and there's some people I want to acknowledge though. In addition to thanking everybody, we already briefly acknowledged the sort of the second act of our lives. You've seen a lot of the first act of the Washington Post. 30 years for us, each of us. At the other end, in the second act,
Oldest married couple in sports.
there are Eric Rydholm and Matt Kelleher who need to stand and take a bow. Who put up with us every day in the studios of PTI, and there are folks, working professionals, who became family along the way with both of us, who I certainly spend more time with than my actual family, and I know they're here. I think they're here still. We're J.A. Adonde and David Aldrich, sitting at the same table. Stand up. And to this day, I bounce ideas off of each of them, especially before any important piece, writing or talking, is finished. And David has some bite marks in his arm to prove that, but that's another story for another day. Anybody who has any success in any industry understands who really helped build the guts of a career. And I feel fortunate that those three people are all here, and it gives me a chance to thank them publicly. Lynn Shapiro, Sandy Bailey, and Jeannie McManus. Are you still here? All of you up, please, up. And Tony owes him a debt of gratitude too. He just won't say it publicly. They enabled us to, to go to bed having written pieces, sometimes with great controversy attached, and sleep very well, because they were the guardians and they were the three greatest editors anybody could ever imagine having. Thank you all. We are honored to be seen for another night as what we used to be, and occasionally still are, journalists. Though I've been gone from the Post for 7 years, I still refer to it as we, as if I'm still part of the team. I'm not. But I'm as proud of what the Post is now as I was as a young reporter there. The Post and the New York Times each deserve a Pulitzer Prize for brilliant reporting and commentary which enlighten an audience that doesn't always want to be enlightened anymore. I'm particularly proud of the words that now appear on the front page of the Post: democracy dies in darkness. Anybody who has ever worked as a journalist ought to feel the mission of enlightening, now as much as any time in our lives. And to be included with the men and women who work toward that every single day, regardless of ridicule or skepticism, is an incredible honor, unprecedented for Tony and for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow. What a night. What a night. Congratulations again, Mike, Tony. Now we're about to close out for the night. But before we retire to the Holman Lounge for cordials and pats on the back and lots of photos, a few final words. Now, as I said earlier, you know why we do this. You can donate to the Journalism Institute year-round. So please support what you've seen tonight. If you're one of the lucky people who have a round sticker on the back of your program, please take home the beautiful centerpiece. And if you bid on items in the silent auction, please be sure to go to the front desk to see if you won, to pay and pick up your items, of course. And a few thank yous. Everybody's looking for their sticker. A night like tonight is not possible without the hard work of some very special people. In particular, I'd like to thank the National Press Club, its officers, its members, the Institute, its board, and its staff. Julie Hsu, you've outdone yourself tonight. And her counterpart, Bill McCarron, you've outdone yourself tonight as well, working in concert. And the wonderful 110 people who work here every single day. Derek DeShield does an extraordinary job of handling the audiovisual for the evening, so we thank him for that. So let's thank our executive chef, Susan Delbert, and her staff who provided us with our meal. And of course, you have committees that put these sorts of things together. I kind of call them teams around here. Led by National Press Club Journalism Institute board member Rob Stoddard and Barbara Bird for the tireless work on the silent auction. And I want to thank the Fourth Estate Award team who helped me select this award. It's Kathy Kiley, Betsy Fisher-Martin, and Rachel Smolkin. And finally, a word of thanks to all of our members who attended tonight's dinner. You are the club. As I've said to you many times these past almost 10 months, that we are a club of champions. We do these things together. And you are members, you're what make this place special. It's why we come here tonight. So I'm happy to see so many members in the house. So it's been a great evening. It's not over yet. Go next door for a nightcap, great pictures. We'll see you back here. Go to press.org for so many wonderful events that we have. You talked about Democracy Dies in Darkness. Marty Barron and Dean Piquet will be back here on October 16th for the Calb Report. So in this very ballroom. So with that, have a good night.
Mr. Wilbon.